Hey everybody, Jay Weidner here, Reality Check. Please subscribe, hit like, and all that other stuff. As you know, I talk a lot about health on this show, but mostly through kind of the ancient science of alchemy and how your dwelling where you live is super important. To build a space around you, and probably even the music you listen to is really important. And today we're going to talk about another aspect of creating a healthy life, and that is the food you eat and exercise and that kind of thing. We're here with Abel James. Hey Abel, how you doing?
Jay, it's an honor. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you too. And we'll talk later about Abel's companies and what he does and stuff. But right now, we're living in this world where we're coming off the VI rash.
Right, we got to be careful with our words.
Yeah, we do. And although it's turning out that all the conspiracy theorists were right from the beginning, I mean, even I got in a clash with Cliff High a year ago about his crazy theories, and now I have to eat it because it turns out that everything he was saying was right, and a lot of other people were saying was right, and they all got kicked off. They all got deplatformed. They all got knocked off the air, and every one of them is turning out to be right. That's all I'm going to say about it. Except I will point out that Fauci stands for fake chi, and that's what the waxy is. It's fake chi. They're giving you something that's going to make you feel better. They're saying, but it's not real. Or if it is real, it's deadly real. Anyway, I'm not going to comment on that either. So we're coming off that big crisis of 2020, Abel, and everybody, I can't hate to say it, even I myself, everybody gained weight. They're eating at home all the time, and it was easy to eat sugar and maybe drink too much sugar. And I saw young people that were in their 20s, and they'd gained 10, 15% weight over that time period. And it kind of broke my heart. And I realized that, not only did they psychologically strangle us, but they also physically strangled us. I mean, my sister couldn't even go for a walk in Orange County, California for I think March and April. I think finally in May, they let her go outside. So, we are in a physical crisis right now, a health crisis, and we don't really have any government to back us up. The healthcare they're giving us is, frankly, not very good. And on top of that, even their food pyramid is completely backwards and wrong. So even their advice is bad. And one thing we've learned also during this last few months and years is that the experts are not only wrong, the experts are frequently the cause of what they're giving us, the expertise about.
Imagine that.
What we have to do now, and even I have to like get more disciplined and like exercise and try to get rid of some of the fat, make some muscle, but also we have to change the way we eat. And so I want to talk about that first. Now, my wife and I, we live on the Ancestral diet for the most part. We cheat, not going to deny it. I cheat every once in a while. It's the only way I can do it is to give myself a reward once a week or so. So what give me like a typical diet plan for a week, say, for what you would recommend that people out there start doing and changing.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll just start by commenting on where you started, which is I just read that it's somewhere around 42% of Americans in the past year gained 30 pounds, which is a significant amount of weight. It's pretty typical for us, especially in bad years or trauma-filled years, to gain 5 or 10 pounds or a couple of pounds, but then the years go by and that adds up to a pretty extreme amount of weight over the decades, over the lifespan. And so, first of all, no judgment. Like we all just went through something monstrous from so many different directions, and we're still experiencing it. We're going to be experiencing the fallout for a very long time. But
yes, we are.
The good news is that working with people for a long enough time, athletes to people who have hundreds and hundreds of pounds to lose, who literally have so much weight that they can't walk, you identify certain principles that tend to work. Now, there is no one size fits all diet. That's one of the reasons that the food pyramid okay, so the food pyramid was upside down and ridiculous and backwards. It's been debunked many times. But also the top down one size fits all approach to nutrition doesn't work either, because we've hung out in person, eaten together, and our needs are going to be completely different. We're in different stages of life. We have different needs in terms of daily activity. I think you outwork me with your garden and all of that, which requires a lot of food, a lot of calories, a lot of nutrients. And our ancestors, even our grandparents, just a few decades back, were actually burning through, and that's not the perfect way to think about it, but they were expending a ton of energy throughout the day, way more than we were, so they could afford to eat much more. And
That's
so
right.
we run into problems because most of the foods available to us now are franken foods, which are artificial or hyped up to inflate our hunger. And so we eat too much of the wrong foods. So even before you start thinking about what to eat, for most people, the benefits they're going to get at the beginning are coming from what they're not eating anymore, which for the most part is going to be the processed carbs and sugars, the foods that come in boxes that are shelf stable, cheap, and then obviously fast food, fried food, and starches in general. It's only recently in the past few decades that we've kind of forgotten that starches fill up the belly, but tend to make you hungrier and don't have the critical nutrients we need to thrive. So, before I ramble on too long, what you should eat, most people are actually under eating protein, especially when you look across the world, and meat is being scapegoated and completely attacked, but it's full of critical and essential nutrients that are impossible or difficult to source
They're
from
going to
other.
outlaw meat.
Okay, so meat is extremely important as a part of uh, the diet because the nutrients that it contains are difficult or impossible to source
Right,
from
right.
other foods, and you really need to know what you're doing strategically, cobble them together. Not that there aren't plant-based ways of going about it, but it really takes a lot of work, research for a lifetime, and even then it's still debatable whether you're getting every single nutrient. We just don't know all of the nutrients that we need. There's this assumption that we know everything. That's not true. So anyway,
Good point.
protein is is something where you're going to probably want to go north of 75 to 100, maybe even 150 grams a day. And for me, the way that I think about it is that is the first nutrient, that macronutrient that I'm looking for. That is the box that you want to check anytime you're hungry. And fats basically make greens, which should also be a significant part of the diet. Fats tend to make greens and proteins taste better. So thinking of bacon fat as a condiment, bacon as a condiment, and then the fat also when you cook up greens in it, for example, really improves the flavor, and you can take simple backyard garden ingredients and within a few minutes of something really delicious and nutritious. And then on the carb side, that's really scalable. If you're super active or really young or have the genetics where you're allowed to get away with this for a while, sometimes you can get away with eating a lot of carbs and sugar for a while. But at some point, and this happened to me, your body becomes resistant to all, you know, there are different biological and physiological ways of explaining it, but basically when you barrage the body with sugar for too long, it just can't take it anymore. And all of a sudden your insulin doesn't work as well as it should, and your body goes out of whack. You start storing fat. And it's difficult but possible for most people to reverse that. So you reverse that by just dialing down the carbs and the sugars and the starches. And there are different ways of going about that, and I'm happy to go whichever direction you'd like.
Yeah, that's probably the hardest part for me. So what happened to me was, first off, I had a scale in my bathroom. This would be 2010, that was
Yep.
broken. It would top out at 195, and you couldn't, no matter not what how much weight you put on it, wouldn't go past that. I did
Okay.
that, so that's one thing. Second was, I was shooting my film, The Last Avatar, and the first day of shooting, and I got back home and I started putting on, watching the dailies, I guess they call it. right? Because it's video, I don't have to wait for it to be processed. So I got it on my computer on the big screen, and I'm watching it with my crew, and I see this guy walking around. I can only see him from here down because the camera is low, and all I see is this huge protruding belly. And everybody go, "Who the hell is that fat ass?" And everybody just kind of looks away, right? Oh my God, that's me. And I completely flipped out. And I called up one of my best friends who's a Iron Man, and he's a naturopath. And I called him up and I said, "Listen, dude, there's something wrong with my scale. It says I'm 195, but then I went to Safeway and I weighed myself and I'm 240." And he goes, "240?" And I go, "Yeah." And then he immediately put me on the Ancestral diet, immediately. Like
Yeah.
immediately. He said, "Go home, have your last piece of pie, have your last ice cream. Tomorrow you start." And he kind of coached me for, I don't know, another couple of months. And what I found that really saved my ass was um, peanut butter or walnut butter or almond butter. Just
Yeah.
take a big slab of it and stick it in your mouth and eat it whenever you got that urge to eat some sugar or carbs. And it usually it usually worked. And so it took me about a year to lose it. I got down to 180. I lost 60 pounds. And I know for certain that the guy who owns Gaia does not like people overweight. I'll just put it to you that way. He's not prejudiced against them, but if you are overweight and you work for him, he tries to put you in health programs to lose weight, which is a good thing. And so he asked me to come to Gaia in 2011. I just lost the 60 pounds and I was like in, fighting shape and everything, back lifting weights and doing everything. And so I know it works. That's all I'm saying, is I know I am personal testimony that the ancestral diet it works. Another point I want to make is it's a great book. It's called Sex, Time, and Power by Dr. Leonard Shlain. And in there, at one point in the book, he's talking about how we became what we are from the past. A really good book, excellent book. Actually says that women direct evolution. That's the point of the book. And he talks about how the grasses are transformed by the cows and the deer and everything into things that you can't get by eating vegetables. There's a super rarity that's inside the meat and he says the minute that we turned to eating meat, it transformed us completely into another animal. Anyway, great book. So yeah, that's my take on the whole thing.
Yeah. And the eating of meat and the history of fire, speaking about alchemy, and
Yeah.
depending on which rabbit hole you go down, was basically involved in the growth of our brains and allowed us to become the thinking mammals that we are, or that some of us are these days.
Oh,
But when you exclude meat from the diet, let's just think about that for a second. You still have to source calories and
I
nutrients
do.
and proteins and everything else from somewhere. And living in Colorado, especially with sandy soil at elevation, you have a greenhouse and you grow certain things. But how hard is it to grow fat? And how hard is it to grow protein, for example? How
Really
hard is it to grow calories in general?
super.
Pretty takes a lot of work to grow greens, to grow, just tomatoes and peppers and cucumbers, certain things, squash, they'll go crazy and they'll keep growing, but it's really hard to eat your entire diet from those things. And when you visit third world countries, or when you used to be able to visit them, you'll see how much they really value meats, and meats of almost any kind, the scrawniest little birds, the scrawniest little pigs you've ever seen. But, I remember being in Bali in Indonesia and talking to one of the people who lived there about what he ate with his family. And he said it was typically, and I asked him why he thought Americans were so fat. And he spent quite a bit of time with tourists. And he said, well, with our family, we'll have a little bit of veggies from the backyard because we live with our family and we just grow a little bit of stuff back there. We have just a little bit of rice, and then maybe a quarter of a chicken will feed a briny chicken. Will feed the whole family. And then in America, you order a bucket of chicken for yourself. And then it's like, he said, that's why Americans are fat. And I thought that was a great way of summing it up, because the the idea that we can just come to the table with anything we want and get away with it, eating anything that's just there is a something that we really need to grow up from. But it's hard to, because we treat food, especially in the absence of other addictions, and we try to get rid of one addiction and the same sort of behavior, sourcing dopamine and other brain chemicals, comes from kind of abusing our food. And we all do it in certain circumstances because it works. Nothing works like eating a pint of ice cream.
I haven't done that in a long time.
Well, and that's, you can eat some ice cream. We eat pizza, we eat bread, but you can't eat all of it.
Right.
Like, it's not, you can't out exercise a bad diet. It's not about counting calories, but it is about understanding, what a fistful of food is, or what a reasonable serving of food is. And also partitioning your nutrients. Like if you're working on a super hard, long day, lifting things, expending energy, working outside in the garden or whatever, you might want to eat twice as much food that day, twice as many carbs, and you can and will probably get away with it. But on the days that you're sedentary, your body will behave in a totally different way. Your blood sugar will spike from eating a smaller amount of starch and sugar, and you just can't get away with the things uh, that you can when you're really working your body. And you also need to refuel, and if you don't, your body falls apart. So it's not this one size fits all, every day the same type deal that a lot of people, a lot of fitness bunnies sell it as. It really is something that you have to get a handle on and navigate.
Yeah. So, well, so you're dealing with you had a TV show, right? And you were dealing with morbidly obese people,
Yeah.
right? And then you would help them lose weight. So you're dealing with someone who's maybe 600 pounds. Well, what is the first thing you do?
Okay, so the guy I worked with on the TV show, his name was Kurt, from Atlanta, and we're still friends to this day. But when I got him, he was a grandpa who was 352 pounds, I think
Whoa.
52% body fat. More than half his body was fat. And tall guy. He made me look like a little hobbit. But when I got him, he had 4 pages of medical problems, including he was in a head-on collision years earlier, and the doctors didn't do the surgery right and put some metal in his and around his spine that went bad, got staph throughout his system, got blood clots, and then he had to have part of his neck removed. So like heavy lifting and doing typical kind of fitness, athletic based powerlifting stuff, which really does work and quickly for a lot of people,
It
was
does.
mostly out of the question for him, and out of the question for anyone who's carrying 50, 100 plus extra pounds. Like you can't be doing burpees to get you there, right? And that's one of the problems too, is like I do burpees, but I'm in pretty good shape, and if you're not, that's just not going to work. So where do you start with someone who especially can't really move that well? Most of the results you're going to get in terms of your size are going to come from nutrition and your diet anyway. But the weird part is when you try to undereat or overexercise, your body reacts against that. And it's like, oh, I'm getting less food. I'm moving more. I better dial down the metabolism. And so people, all of a sudden are burning through less energy and fewer calories, and they get away with eating even less. And so you have this yo-yo dieting effect. And basically the biggest loser, that's what happened to a lot of the people on that show, where you lose an extreme amount of weight really, really quickly through just depleting yourself of calories, and over exercising for a while, and usually starving yourself of water as well, and all sorts of other nonsense. But then uh, you you torpedo your metabolism, and that can cause lasting damage for a lot of people. So this is just something you don't want to do. But there has been a ton of research looking back many, many decades that's not that hard to find, that shows a protein sparing modified fast is kind of the jargon that will bring up some of this work. But What that means is that you're getting an adequate amount of protein for your body's needs to maintain your muscle, to do repair, and all of the things that you need protein for, which is too many for me to get into right here. But basically, you get your protein, then you eat a little bit of non starchy veg, low glycemic things that aren't going to spike your blood sugar, and you can undereat your technical caloric needs by like 1,000 calories. You can eat like 500 calories a day or 1,000 calories a day. And after your body builds the metabolic machinery to do this, which some of us have through practice of intermittent fasting or cyclic ketogenic dieting or certain things. But anyway, once you shift into this gear, you're sourcing your protein from the food you're eating because you're still eating protein, but not a ton of it. And then the fat that your body is going through and using is coming from your body fat stores, just like a bear, it is meant to put on a ton of weight and then hibernate, go through almost all of it. And this is a natural cycle that your body can kind of shift in and out of. Not exactly like a bear, but kind of like that. And so when you do this protein sparing modified fast and you get the electrolytes you need, you get salt, magnesium, potassium, there is a bit of work that you need to do and research in order to do this well. And obviously with a medical practitioner and health practitioners around you, it's best to work with a team of people who know what they're doing. But if you approach it this way, instead of just trying to cut your calories in half like most diet plans do, but kind of still eat your ice cream and still eat your cookies and Oprah still eating her bread or whatever all that stuff is and counting it, no, eat. The craziest part is you eat, say 75 grams of protein, you eat a little bit of those non-starchy veggies from your backyard garden or from the local health food store or whatever, and you drink water and you're not hungry. Like once you eat enough protein, you're not hungry anymore and you're not getting all these cravings after a couple weeks. So this is kind of what happened with Kurt when I worked with him. He was eating more than 500 calories today. It was more like maybe 1,000, 1,500, but more than that on some days too. But he lost over 14 weeks. He lost 87 pounds and down to, I think, 25% body fat and completely transformed. I mean, he ran a half marathon and went rock climbing after being 352 pounds before that, just doing things that shaved decades off his life. And that's the thing that is super powerful to me, is people be able to literally get back on their feet and walk again after not being able to do so if they're morbidly obese. Or, people who like Kurt, who wanted to play with his grandkids, but couldn't really bend over and was out of breath all the time and feeling sick and wanting to sleep. And so you get your life back and you double your energy. Some of that hype is real.
Absolutely.
I'm over energized, as you know, and it's kind of annoying sometimes. But once you eat well and you kind of get a handle of all of this, you do have more energy to deal with. And it's really fascinating to see what people do with that. They start businesses, they like catch the health bug, and they do all sorts of crazy, wonderful things. And so most people are settling for way too little energy and just constant cravings. And I was there too in my early 20s.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. So I think that we've just been taught everything wrong, and when I look back at when my grandfather was a farmer, and I remember when I was a little kid watching them eat, and I mean they ate a lot, but they worked their butts off. It was unbelievable. They would wake up at 5 a.m. and they would work until dark. If it was summer, it was 9 o'clock.
Yep.
If it was in the winter, it would be 5 o'clock, but it was all work all day long. And they would wake up and they would have eggs, bacon, pancakes, uh, potatoes. It was unbelievable how much they ate. And it was all organic. They didn't have pesticides, right? In
Yep.
those days. And and they were all really healthy and they all lived to be really old. And I think that's kind of what we have to do, is go back to those old ways. So a lot of people are going to be saying, "Oh, yeah, that's easy for you to say, but meat's really expensive and it's going up in price." And what about people who just don't have the money to do that? I mean, that's a lot of the problem. That's why they're eating the starches because they're cheap. Macaroni and cheese is cheap.
Yeah. Yeah, it appears to be cheap, but it depends on how you account for
Agreed.
this. Once you start looking at your medical bills, the cost of health insurance, all the times you go into the doctor and there's just, another prescription or another procedure or another something, like do that math and add up how many thousands of dollars that is for you or your family or your kids. Uh, and then compare that to the amount that you're spending on food or the amount that the healthy food would cost compared to the non-healthy food. We all know that eating tacos and pizza is bad for us. Some of us have given up and we just drink soda and eat junk food, but we all kind of know, right? And we know that it doesn't have to cost more necessarily. There are different ways of going about it. So, my brother runs a farm in upstate New York, and he worked on a bunch of different farms over the years, and many of them have, and I'm sure the last year complicated things, but this will be coming back. The option to go in there and help out, help pick things, help
Oh
weed,
yeah.
whatever, for half a day or just a few hours, or if you volunteer your time, you join a CSA, you just get as many veggies as you want. Basically you get as many veggies as you want for your time or, a little bit of money, a fair value. You're not paying a middleman when you go directly to the farmers themselves. And similar deal with meats. Just buy them in bulk if you can. If you're really young and broke, and trust me, I know what that's like.
Me
Um,
too.
for many years living like that, it is difficult. But if you try to source your protein first, not from power bars and, from like these pre-made protein-based foods that are trying to sell you protein, although some, powders or supplements can be helpful, but they're expensive. Supplements are an expensive but convenient way of going about it. You don't have to go that way. I ate tuna fish and spaghetti for a long time. I would switch the spaghetti maybe to something a little different if, if I knew then what I knew now. But, eating eggs is something that you can argue about how expensive they are, but even if you're buying the cheap or middle of the road ones, they're not as good as the backyard chickens. That's as good as it gets. And then, the organic fancy pants, free range pasture based ones would be great if what they're selling on the label is actually that. But oftentimes that's just, there's no accountability there. So that's not true. So you can't always pay more and get a better results out of this. It's not that simple either. But there are always ways to, you know, there are backyard eggs in almost every neighborhood. We've lived across the country in dozens of states over the past decades for various weeks or months at a time. And we've been able to source grass-fed, pasture-raised ruminant animals like beef, usually nose to tail. We've been able to get chickens and poultry and duck, and also some source of good veg or fruit that's seasonal and local. And so if you get local stuff and you try to skip the middlemen in all the stores, and that comes from all the distribution and shipping things back and forth and processing it in China and then shipping it back, you're paying for all of that, or it's being subsidized by your tax dollars. So I encourage people to reframe a little bit what your priorities are around your health. And also you realize pretty quick that when you do look at your food as something that you can enjoy, and some people enjoy it more than others, then spending a little bit of extra, a couple extra dollars on a really special cheese is something that makes me and my wife excited when we go to the grocery store. It's like we're looking for the next new cheese, or a little pate, or a cracker we haven't tried, or this fancy seltzer from frickin' Italy, or something silly like that. But for a few extra bucks, it can be entertaining, it can be fun, and you can find a lot of things that you didn't expect to like. And that's a way to keep yourself going throughout all of this, because I don't think anyone's going to really help themselves spiritually by eating chicken and broccoli for the rest of their lives. There's more to this than that.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, we approach it from almost a sacred way. The way we make the food and what we buy,
Yeah.
and just like you, we know our farmers, and we farm too. And we just got 5 chickens 2 weeks ago, so we're going to have all the eggs we want here very soon. And so yeah, it's really important to cut the middleman out, because be honest with you, the meat that you buy at the store is already on its way to being rotten.
Oh yeah.
It's taken from the slaughterhouse to get to that plastic packaging. That meat is already going. So you got to eat it right away or put it in the freezer. But if you go to the rancher, like I do, I get it like the next day. And then it's in my freezer and I'm cool. And I've got, enough to sustain myself for a long time. And it's all high quality.
Better. So
And
much
then,
better.
yeah. And then when we eat it, it's a real special thing. It's not just like, oh, we eat and we sit in front of the TV and like a TV dinner or something, but we don't do that. We light candles, we put on music and make
Yeah.
sure that the meal itself is just like everything else, is part of a sacred tradition that you do. And when you do that, you don't need to eat as much, by the way, because you eat slow. I'll give you a story.
Yeah.
Italy, shooting a video or a documentary about 3 years ago. It was a little small town in northern Italy, and I had a lot of time to kill because the guy was old, and so he could only shoot from like 8 in the morning till noon. So I had all the rest of the day to kill. Right,
Hours.
it was a
Those are
little tiny
Italian
town.
hours.
It was awesome, and so I sit in these Italian restaurants, right, uh, and I realized that they all get together about 6 o'clock at night, and they eat for 3 hours. Literally, they sit there for 3 hours. And honestly, they really don't eat very good. I mean, not they eat,
Right. That's true.
but
Lots
they're
of
eating
pasta.
bread and they're eating pasta and they're drinking wine. They're drinking wine all day. That's all I could conclude was that they were drinking red wine all day. I mean, I'd watch a guy, I see him at noon and I see him at 5 and I see him at 8 and like, my God, you know, and I thought to myself, and nobody's fat. Nobody was fat. There wasn't one person that was overweight. Nobody. And of course, there are hills. There's a very hilly town, so everybody
Right.
had to go up, walk up and down these hills, and automobiles were not, the primary source of transportation. Walking was, so that helped too. But when I got back to America, and I was, in New York airport, and I was looking at everybody, I was like, "Holy cow, what are we doing wrong here?" Right?
Right. And
Started looking into Italian food codes, and I realized, yes, they are eating bread. Yes, they are eating pasta, but it's all organic. There's
they
no,
have standards.
not allowed at all in their food. They have the strictest codes in the world almost. Same with their beef and their chicken. It's like super high code. That's why it was so good. That's why just even a simple pizza in Italy is so good, because everything on there is organic.
And a lot of people remark about how you can eat a bunch of these pastries and pizzas. I've experienced this myself, and breads and all these other pastas, wonderful things in Italy, or other foods that are kind of like that in South America, and not get fat. Just like eat your heart out for weeks of a vacation and lose weight at the end of it. And people are like, "What's happening?" And oftentimes, I do believe, and definitely some of the data supports this, that with other countries that have strong food traditions, making their foods from scratch, but also these laws and codes, and just general standards around what you can call a beer, for example,
Right.
or what qualifies as bread. Certain things are not food, and they should not be, like the ingredients that go into yoga mats should not go into our breads, but they have and do in America, and they do not in other places. Like the
No, that's
standards
right.
that China has for a lot of things are much higher than America has for many of the things that we consume, and we should be very concerned. This is the deal, and why it's so hard for most people to come over to the other side is we want to believe, and I want to believe this too, that we're protected by our governments, and that we're safe, and that we can go into the grocery store, and if we follow the government recommendations, that we'll be healthy, our kids will thrive, and all that. No, you've got to put your shields up and do your research, unfortunately, and put the work in, and find that we're living in some sort of upside down world where a lot of the recommendations are backwards, completely backwards, and they have no remorse. They make zero corrections or apologies when they're wrong, and they're wrong constantly. And it should be evident at this point, but it does take that kind of emotional and spiritual leap to say, "Oh, I'm not being protected here. Let's reorient. Let's take a step back, maybe reevaluate what we thought, because food is super personal, it's emotional, it's tied up in our family as well. Being such a personal thing, when you make those changes, sometimes you have to admit that you were maybe making the wrong decision before. Like I was vegetarian for years, for a
So was
while,
I.
to admit to myself, oh, maybe that's not the right call for me now, right? Like that's the most important thing. It doesn't matter if it was the right call for you then or if you were making mistakes. As long as you learn from those mistakes, you can reorient and then adapt. And we all have to adapt. We're all wrong about things all the time. And it's very important to try to build that compass as opposed to trying to just follow what you're told. As much as we need to rely on experts and authorities and people who have done their research, you have to do your own as well and be really careful with who you're trusting. And I think at this point it's pretty obvious that the top-down recommendations, no matter, what vertical we're talking about, are have been pretty off for a while.
Yeah, it's a sad story, man, that we can't trust our experts anymore, that we're on our own. And that's actually a very Aquarian age type of thing, by the way.
Yeah.
Aquarians are in the Aquarian age, it's about knowledge gathering and your own personal quest is that. And that's kind of what this show's about, is everybody has on their own personal quest for knowledge. And that's one of the reasons I do this is I'm trying to condense this knowledge and show that just because it's quirky or on the edge, maybe, doesn't mean that it's not real and true. And the thing about what you're advocating, this ancient diet, it's rooted in a long history. Terence McKenna used to tell me that he wouldn't put anything in his body that had not been tested by humans for at least 2,000 years. And that's why he didn't like to take LSD or smoke DMT.
Yeah.
He preferred the ayahuasca and the natural psychedelics over the synthetics, but also he did that in everything else in his life too. All the foods that he ate and everything were all rooted in thousands of years of tradition. And I think that you need to address that. Why is that so important?
Yeah, well, beer and wine totally get a pass then, right? Because it's interesting when you look back at the history of agriculture and you ask the questions, well, why did we start growing all of these things? And why did we shrink in stature? And why did our bones get weaker and our teeth get all crooked and messed up and our jawline not match anymore? A lot of bad things happened when we switched from being hunter gatherers to agriculture, debatably around 10,000 years ago. Uh, but when, did we grow those grains to ferment them or did we grow them to eat them directly is a question that should be asked, and we don't really know what that combination was because it probably was some sort of combination, but we do know that the safest way of drinking water for a long time was drinking low alcohol
That's right.
fermented, kind of a beer type drink.
Yeah,
And
that's where beer came from, was dunking the bread into a bowl of water. Because the bread would be so hard that you would have to have the water, and then that water would turn to beer.
so it's really fascinating because alcohol, you mentioned the people, in Italy who were just drinking endless amounts of wine. They seem super healthy and happy. And it's like, how are they getting away with this? And when you look at sourcing your wine from nature in the true sense of the word rather, um, and you're looking at the small Italian wineries that are growing without all of these crazy sprays, without all of the Roundup uh, and pesticides that are used in California, and without, especially, a lot of people don't know this, but wine in America is a processed manufactured ingredient, almost more like a soda than like a kombucha or like a proper beer. And it's full of additives, sweeteners, just things that pump up the alcohol, these modified yeasts that are freaks of nature, and all sorts of dyes and crazy stuff. But if you leave all that out and you just go back to the Italian small farm, the cheese is stinky and weird and has, an earthy flavor and kind of this its own unique thing going on. Same with the wine. Maybe it doesn't taste like the smack you in the face syrupy stuff you get from California that's 16% alcohol or whatever. But you can sip it all day because it's 9% or it's 7%.
That's right.
It's half the alcohol. and you don't have any of those artificial things in there as well. And so that kind of applies not just to the wine or to the beer in Germany, where there's a long tradition of using certain ingredients in certain ways, and the other junk just doesn't qualify. It doesn't, you can't use that word to describe these things, they've decided.
Right.
And we see this in America where it's like we call corn that's organic corn that's grown in the backyard in the organic old school way, but not technically certified organic. And then you have GMO corn, and they're all just called corn. And as Americans, 60+% of our diet is basically corn, and we have no idea like the difference between them or the health effects, or if we should even be eating corn really as a food at all as humans.
Exactly.
You know, how do you fatten cattle? You feed them grains, you feed them corn, and they fatten very quickly. How do you fatten humans? Same deal. And you can see it playing out all around us.
It's everywhere. Got to really avoid it. Now, avoid processed foods for sure. Just don't even bother. I mean, every once in a while, I'll have a organic root beer, like once every 3 months.
Oh yeah.
That's about it, you know.
As long as you're, coloring within the lines when you're not paying attention most of the time, when you're on autopilot just throughout the day, even throughout the weeks. Then on the weekends, you get to color outside the lines and have a bit more fun, but not endless amounts of fun. I remember I had Tim Ferriss on my podcast years ago, like right around the time I started it. And it was really big on people trying to get all of these 80-20 results and big cheat days. And I think he's kind of corrected his course over the years, or kind of says that he doesn't do it that way anymore. But the idea that you can have a giant cheat day of doing whatever you want might work for like The Rock or someone else who's juicing, or someone who's 17, but it's not a good plan. Eating a slice or two of real like sourdough pizza, or Italian style, or just something that you truly enjoy. That you're really sitting there and taste. Like you said, it's very important that we link up what our brain and body is experiencing through perception and the food that's going in. Because when we're just kind of eating on autopilot, studies have shown that we overeat by 25-50% without even realizing. We'll just double the amount of food we're eating sometimes because we're not paying attention. So paying attention to it is a practice you definitely want to build. It's not the most interesting thing at first, but it becomes better over time.
Yeah, and I want to reemphasize something. When I said that the Italians were eating 3 hours long, starting from 6 to 9 or 7 to 10, they're not eating. They're talking to each other.
That's right.
What's
Yeah.
going on is there's like 7 entrees coming through. First it'll be snails, and then it'll be a salad, and then and it's just like, you're watching this, and everybody just takes a little bit. Everybody,
Yeah, it's amazing.
they take just a little bit, and then they talk for another 20 minutes, and the next one comes. And so eat slow is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and also, I mean, portions are something that are ridiculous in America. And I remember the first time that we keep talking about Italy, but it's just a good example. I remember
It is.
getting a coffee there, and I was like, wow, their description of sizes compared to Starbucks or whatever is completely different. You get thimbles, same thing in Thailand. I remember when I was getting like a martini or something, and he had like this little thimble that was this, certified size, and he was like, soup, these 2 little pours, and I'm like, that's it. This is literally 2 sips. And he's like,
Yep.
that's it.
Yep.
This is how this works. And so we all can kind of develop that. I don't like most people counting calories, but being able to
Oh,
eyeball food in general is a skill that you want to build, and it doesn't take that much know-how to get there. And so the portion control thing is kind of true, but it's more just like, can you get your buzz from 1 or 2 beers instead of 2 6-packs? Can you get your buzz from like 4 beers, and apply that to your cookies, apply that to your cakes, your ice cream, and whatever. You can have a little bit, but also save it for, if you can, the days that you did heavy lifts, lots of moving around, lots of walking or activity, or just treat it as a refuel, and your body will reward you that way. And try not to over reward yourself on the days where you have been sitting there, because basically people want to say that nutrition and diet matters more than exercise, and I would agree with
Yeah.
that, but it's overly simplistic, because you need the exercise piece as well. When you
Yeah,
take
let's
it
talk
away,
about that. That's a great,
yeah.
great segue because I wanted to go to that. So let's
Okay, so
talk about exercise. I I had quit. I was very athletic all the way up until maybe my early 40s. And then I was making films all the time and just busy all the time, 16 hours a day, usually
yeah,
6 days a week. And then I'd collapse on Saturday and try to recover and do my laundry and all the other stuff. I know a lot of people live that kind of life. And then when I got really ill in 2018, I really decided that I was going to really start a super regime of exercise. And I began just walking for like 40 minutes a day, then 50 minutes a day, then an hour and 15 minutes, then an hour and a half. Then I started going up the mountainside. After I got used to finally an hour and a half of just walking flat, then I started going up the mountainside for an hour.
yeah,
So
yeah.
hour up and a half hour down, right? Then I started the weights. And that was the hardest thing of all. And but I tell you that also paid the best benefits
Yes.
is lifting weights. So it really did. And I do yoga. So I get up in the morning, I do yoga, and then I hike for an hour and a half. And then Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I do weights. And I do weights for about a half hour. And I don't do heavy weights, but I do a lot of reps. And I
Yes.
found that with the weights, just building a sheet of muscle on your body, like it seems to chew calories up without you working as much.
Yes, definitely. And a lot of people, especially women, skip over this part because there's this idea that they're all going to look like Arnold Schwarzenegger
No.
as soon as they start lifting weights. And if only that were true for men, it's definitely not, you know.
Yes.
Uh, that dude was juicing for sure, and is
For
not shy
sure.
about it. And uh, so anyway, when you're looking at what happens to your body when you exercise, it's really not as much about burning off calories, especially for exercise sessions. It is over the course of the day if you're a farmer or if you're someone who's working super super hard like a ridiculous athlete. But for most of us, it just doesn't work like that. And so once you start having a body composition that is more muscular and more athletic, your insulin, your blood sugar operate differently. They operate more effectively. You can get away with more things. So, for example, I've worn several months of continuous glucose monitors, which you stick into your arm and it goes into the interstitial fluid and measures your blood sugar every 15 minutes or so. And so you get this reading of all these, like throughout the day, whenever you get mad or stressed out, you can see it. Whenever you eat something or don't eat something, you can see how that manifests. And one of the things that I noticed, um, being like I've been in decent shape for about 10 years. I was in really bad shape before that for a few years. But being in the shape I'm in now, I tried to see if I could spike my blood sugar by drinking a bunch of sugar. So I went for a big run and came back after fasting pretty much all day. And I drank a giant thing of coconut water, so like 15, 20 grams of sugar straight up.
Wow.
Then I ate 3 or 4 pieces of sourdough toast. I had a couple of cookies, I think, a brownie or two, and then I drank something else too. I think I ate some crackers. And it was like it barely even budged after eating all of those carbs all in one sitting, because I was replenishing my glycogen stores, which were
Right.
depleted after running up the mountain and
Sure.
coming back. But on the day when it was just a rest day, I ate these, like, what are they, like paleo or keto chips. So they're made like mostly without grains, which should be a good thing. But most of those foods are also made with tapioca starch, or they're made with some gluten-free starch, which to your body is as bad as sugar, sometimes even worse. So anyway, on
Right.
my rest day, I eat just, a couple of handfuls of these supposedly, kind of low carb type tortilla chips, and my blood sugar goes as high as it ever went. went out, which, to be fair, wasn't super high, but it was as high as I could make it go from food, just from that. So I think it's really important that people recognize your body is always in a different state. Sometimes you're hungrier than others, but learn what true hunger is. And one of the best ways to do that is by um, doing some form of intermittent fasting or trying to tighten the window of when you're eating your food. So I typically eat only between the hours of noon and 7 to 8 o'clock at night, but
Yep, same
usually
here.
more often I
Yep,
start at 3 p.m. or 4 p.m. And
yep.
so it's like one meal, 1.5 meals a day.
That's what
And
I do too. I do have
yeah,
a drink in the morning, a super alkaline drink with tons of stuff in it, and that I got from my friend, the naturopath. I've been doing that for
nice.
about 10 years. And it doesn't have that many calories in it. It's mostly green, but that's the first thing I do. And then I don't eat until about 1. And then I try to eat around 6. Then that's it. Nothing more for the rest of the night.
Yeah,
I find that works really good. And so, I mean, you have to, it takes a lot of work. That's the other thing.
it
It's
does.
an easy thing, and you can't really run on auto. You just can't. It's not going to let you. You really don't want to run on auto anyway. It's food. It's one of the most important things that you're ever going to do in your daily life. So you don't want to go down and just get a couple burgers at McDonald's and run on auto. Just you don't. It's just not the way to live your life. You're living your life that way. You need to change the way you're living your life.
Yeah, and you can get away with it for a little while. And once again, no judgment if you're there, but you kind of you have to keep your eye on the ball, to use a terrible cliche. You can't just ignore health for a while.
Right.
It's one of those things that will definitely come back to bite you or haunt you. And for a lot of people, including me, you have to have a serious health scare in order to kind of take responsibility for your own health. For me, it was losing everything in an apartment fire 12 years ago and then realizing that I was also fat. That was the worst part. I'm just like, oh, it's like the rest of my life is out of control. And I finally looked at myself. It's like, I got kind of fat. What happened?
Yeah.
And you, that's okay because that's totally normalized now.
It
Most
is.
of us are, and you have to be willing to be the weird one if you don't want to die early, fat, and sick. And so it does take work, but it takes less work over time, especially once you build some of the habits that are quite simple, like you said, waking up and hydrating or get a bit of nutrients in, moving, uh, and then doing that most days. If you hadn't been doing that before, that alone will change your freaking life. And then for the fasting piece, that was another one that really empowered me. Especially, I was running marathons at the time. At that time in my life, I was running a lot, and I wanted to see if all my muscles would fall off, or if I could get better performance, or control my body composition a little better. And turns out you can. Intermittent fasting is an incredible tool, um, especially for men. Certainly not for everyone. Not at every stage of life. Not if you're a pregnant woman. Not if you're a child. But for certain people, especially with a bit too much weight, or if you have the tendency, like I have the body type that can put on fat, it can go into that mode.
So do
And so
I.
it helps me stay out of that mode.
Yeah.
And it's a powerful tool for that, because for me, when I'm not eating, I don't tend to be hungry until I start eating.
Yeah. Same here. Same here. I don't get hungry until I take that first bite. Then I'm hungry.
Yeah.
Also, I want to emphasize on the exercise part, resting.
Yes.
Overemphasize that part. Do not exercise every single day.
Right.
I do 5 days and 2 days off, and I give myself a thorough rest. And today is one of my days off, and I thoroughly rest. I curl up with a good book or watch a movie or something, and I make sure my body doesn't. It takes at least one full day a week of just nothing, just resting.
And your willpower.
So,
Like, give your
yeah,
willpower.
yeah, it's really important. Health is really important, and you know what? I'm going to say this: the powers that be want us to be unhealthy. That's my only conclusion. After watching
Yeah.
their advertisements, seeing their foolish pyramids, and looking at the
Look at them.
pharmaceuticals, it's just like, you got to be kidding me. We had cable TV until about 5 months ago, I finally pulled it. And every single ad was about an illness that you have and how you can go to your doctor and get a pill and cure it. And, it was damn depressing. That's why I pulled it. And they're like, they're trying to depress you, And
Yes.
so I think you also have to pull the media, because they're not talking about these things, and the information that they're giving us isn't very good. Sorry.
It's not true. It's the opposite of the truth in a lot of cases.
It
And
is.
when I was on that TV show, that was around the time that the media, all of the media at once, picked up these stories about meat gives you cancer
Yeah.
and it's always bad for you. And then from that point on, and a little bit before that, meat and anyone who talks about it, even if you're talking about grass-fed, pasture-raised, as natural as you get, historical, going back to the Bible shepherd type stuff. No. All of this is gone, and we need lab-grown meats, and we all need to be vegetarians and meatless Mondays. All this stuff. It's damaging and it's scary because people think
Thank you.
know what they're talking about. They often do not. When you used to look things up on the internet, even 10 years ago, you'd probably wind up at some professor's website or someone who actually did the research. Now it's just completely co-opted and censored. And, anyone who talks about responsible things, especially around meat, have long been censored. Rob Wolf and I have talked about this. He has an incredible book and documentary called Sacred Cow. Anyone who wants to do a deeper
Oh,
dive,
great. Yeah.
Are cow farts killing the planet, or do they use too much water and all this stuff? Please read that book. And that's always a great, place to go, is not the internet necessarily. For media like this and following people, it's great. But if you want the research, go and get the books and read those. Don't try to
Yep.
pull together stuff from blogs anymore. Google just doesn't work like that.
No, Rob Wolf's also another good person to follow.
He's great.
Yeah, he's great. And he's like the avocado king, isn't he?
He's the king. He's the king of a lot of things. He's a man of many, many talents. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. I think I should get him on my show. Yeah.
You should.
Yeah, I should. Well, listen, Abel, I'm going to put links up to your products and also your educational programs. And I think you're doing really, really good work. And I think that I have not touched on this show yet, and this is really the first time. And it's one of my top priority subjects. And pretty much I'm aligned with what you're saying and what you're eating and how you're living it. And so I just want everyone to follow your work and maybe get really healthy, because you can do it. I'm proof you can do it. You can lose weight. I'm from size 40 to size 32 on my jeans, and you can do it too. And it's not hard.
Yeah, and Jay, thank you so much once more for having me on. And I do think you're an incredible example of putting in the work and getting incredible results. Just talking about your garden, your personal health, and where you're going, it's worth it. And I think you're also an example of that.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it. All right, everybody. Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe and all that other stuff. And I'm Jay Weidner. This is Reality Check. Thanks for watching.